Okay, so, this is one of those testimonies that when I scheduled it at the beginning of the year, I didn't think I'd be doing this. When we have our testimonies, there's a lot of, good, bad, the beginning and the end and stuff like that. And it's hard to believe where I'm standing on stage right now, and Mark is not going to be giving his testimony, but his daughter. When we say we want you to share your testimonies with individuals and from the stage because God is doing something inside of your life. This dude touched my life. Incredible man. And I'm sure if you've had conversations with him, he's touched your life. Tonight's testimony is a celebration of who this guy was. And the song at the end of that, Healed and Forgiven, Look Where My Chains Are Now. Dude's worshiping Jesus in heaven right now. He is leaving a legacy, though. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight, is that legacy that we all are going to be leaving. So if you guys would, get off your meat, get on your feet, and welcome Taylor. Y'all better be louder than that, man. Come on.
Hello, I'm Taylor. I am a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. As most of you know, my dad, Mark, passed away on February 6th, just 8 days before he was supposed to stand up here and give his testimony of all the wonderful things God had done to change his life. He was so very excited, as was I. I'm not quite sure which one of us was more excited. He talked about it all the time. As I was reading into it, the deeper I got, I realized that he was mostly talking about the times he almost died but didn't, how grateful he was to be here. This stung pretty harshly, but bear with me as his endurance through all of his trials made his story even greater. I came to CR 3 times with him over the past several months. He was always so excited to have me here. And it was always so inspiring hearing recovery stories of how God takes broken people like you and I and turn them into warriors of Christ, and is still doing so. Oh, how he loved to share the good news and the love and mercy that God had for him over the last year and a half, and always. It was on his birthday just a few weeks ago that he got to become a group leader, and I was so proud of him. He was so excited for it. Today I am here to read you his testimony so that his changed legacy may continue to help change the life of others during their new or continued journey with Christ. I thought this would mean a lot to him that I stand up here and do this today. So here I go. These are the words of my father. He wrote this, he finished it right in time. I want you all to know the things I'm about to say is not to brag or boast. It's simply the way it was and how I was shaped into who I am today. My story begins a little different than most that I have heard. I was not abused or in an abusive family. My parents were not alcoholics or drug users. I was blessed from the very beginning with great, loving parents. I have one older brother. My parents were coal people in the upper middle class when I was a child. They called themselves Christians, but did not really follow Christ. But we were very much so believers in God. We went to church only on special occasions. Because of my dad's position with his company, he was always being gifted from vendors. He would bring home bottles and bottles of alcohol, which he stored in the cabinet. Although they drank very little, alcohol was always around, especially for holiday guests and family gatherings. While they both worked and was gone from early morning to late evenings, me and my friends would sometimes take bottles from the back of the cabinet and refill the bottle with either tea or water, depending on the kind of alcohol we took. It was later in life that I told my dad I had done this, and he told me he had never realized I did. This was the early beginning of my alcohol use. We always went on beach vacations every summer, and my parents would always take one of the neighborhood kids with us. Otherwise, they would never get to go. In the summer of 1968, my parents brought one of my neighborhood girls that used to babysit my brother and I. At the campground we stayed at, there was a creek that went down the side of the campground and dumped into the ocean. The creek was normally about ankle deep, and I loved to get in and catch minnows where they seemed to be thousands of them. One particular day, there was a major thunderstorm that went through and dumped a lot of rain. After the storm, I asked my babysitter if she would walk me down to the creek, and after Mom's approval, that's what we did. I stepped into the creek and immediately went under. I couldn't swim at the time. The rapid water from the storm had apparently washed the sand out from the bottom of the creek, and suddenly it became a raging river, several feet deep. I struggled to stay afloat. I remember going under and coming up, gasping for air. Suddenly, a young boy with one of those big orange pillow-type life jackets pulled me out of the water. I don't know to this day where he came from. Neither I or my babysitter had seen him when we got there or when we left. I remember it as if it were yesterday. I didn't think much about this until later in life. Who was this boy and why was he there with a life jacket? Flash forward to college. After community college, I went to New Bern, North Carolina School of Aviation, where I got my commercial pilot's license with the goal of being an airline pilot. However, in the spring of 1981, I got a job at a large coal mining company in Duffield, Virginia, due to my dad's influence. He got me the job, but I was the one who had to put in the work to keep it, and so the work I did. In 1982, I married this beautiful young girl from Clintwood, Virginia. Her parents, like mine, were hardworking folks. But unlike mine, they were truly devout Christians who gave everything to God. This is where I started going to church more, even though sometimes I felt pushed to do so. This little girl from Clintwood, who later gave me 3 beautiful children, would soon begin to lead a miserable life. In 1983, I was promoted at the age of 23 and put on the road selling coal equipment. I was traveling through the eastern coal fields with a company car and an expense account. I gained valuable knowledge about the business so that later I would end up starting my own business in that field. In 1988, my oldest daughter was born. What a special gift it is becoming a parent for the first time. My second daughter came 5 years later in 1993. I began wanting to change my life. I was looking for a church to start attending, but was having a hard time finding a fit. In 1995, through a business friend, I was introduced to Highlands Fellowship. We started attending when it was still in the auditorium at Abingdon High School, and soon found this church I had been looking for. I soon became a member and was baptized. Nothing in my heart truly changed that day. In 1996, I started my own company selling coal equipment. That same year, I started an aviation brokerage, selling and renting aircraft. I then established an aircraft charter company. I did business both domestically and internationally in Mexico and being an agent doing business in South Africa. Although I had been baptized, my faith and following of Christ was not genuine. With all these years traveling, I put myself in some really bad situations at bars, nightclubs, and strip clubs. There were shows all across the country and even some in Mexico. The first thing I looked for in every town was a liquor store, a nightclub, or a gentleman's club. I committed unfaithful acts to my wife on numerous occasions and had several affairs. She was with me through it all, and I think she knew, but she never brought it up. In the late 90s, I met a man who began to buy a lot of my products. He invited me to start visiting customers in Louisville and Lexington, Kentucky. Soon we began going to parties, bars, and strip clubs. In 1998, I was at some type of club in these cities 33 out of 52 weekends. It was at this time I was introduced to cocaine. A lot of my money went towards these things. In late 1999, I was in an accident that caused a lot of pain. I was prescribed pain medication and soon became addicted. I was drinking bourbon on top of these to try and ease the pain. At one point, I was spending $3,000 a month on pain medication from the streets. My wife had my first son, at least at the time I thought he was my first son, in February of 2000. I was excited at first, but then began to selfishly think about how this was going to cut into my partying and travel. I'm 40 years old with the baby. By the way, I love this boy with a passion today. He is easily one of my best friends. In late 2000, I met a young stripper. We began to party and travel everywhere together, all while my wife was at home with my children. This became a serious affair. In June 2001, my wife busted me. I left home and my divorce was finalized in 2002. My drinking was obviously getting out of hand. On top of losing a lot because of my spending money on partying, we had then lost everything after September 11th, 2001, when the government shut down all aircraft due to terrorist attacks, and this didn't help the situation. We lost most of everything we owned, including vehicles, airplanes, and a house. I didn't care. I was still out there partying while they were foreclosing on our house and towing our cars. I was a selfish, narcissistic man. I was away from my kids for over 3 years, with the exception of an occasional visit here and there. I was still out there partying every day and spending what money I had left that I had worked so hard for earlier in life. In January 2005, I had had enough, or so I thought. I wanted to come back home, and I did. My wife and I tried to reconcile. This didn't work out so well. In 2009, I found my son. That was a result of a one-night stand. He was 19 when we met him. He came down from Ohio to meet me and his siblings. It was a very comfortable meeting, and now he is a major part of our family. My ex-wife, after finding out about him, said to us, "I can't blame him. It's not his fault. He had nothing to do with it." She took him in like he was her own, and they love each other with a passion. Wow. One Saturday afternoon in the same year, I was out on the deck trying to get the grill lit. I had several large ribeyes ready, but the wind was so strong I couldn't get it lit. I was drinking excessively, and I got so mad that I started screaming to God. "Is that all you got?" I said. "Let's see some more." And he didn't write this, but I remember specifically him saying, "Smite me, almighty smiter." Kind of like Lieutenant Dan on Forrest Gump. The next morning, God showed me up. After an early morning basketball game at the rec center, I started having trouble breathing. I was taken to the ER and was told I had a pulmonary embolism. That is a blood clot of the lung. And that I was very fortunate to be alive. I was put on blood thinners and told I would probably be on them for life. One of the things you are not supposed to do on blood thinners is drink alcohol. But it didn't stop me. I don't think I thanked God for keeping me alive at that time. My reconciliation with my wife was over by 2008 when the woman I left her for the first time was back in the picture. The party started all over again and lasted a couple years, and then it was over. In June 2009, my dad, which was my hero, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. By October, he was gone. The man I depended on to give me all the love and encouragement about life. He was the best dad ever, and he was gone. I was drinking at his funeral. By 2010, I was a full-blown alcoholic. I now had to have it to function and not just to get a buzz. I was coaching my son's football and basketball teams through a church around this time. I would have to go to the bathroom to shoot a couple airplane bottles to keep from throwing up on the field or court. In October of that year, my kids begged me and my doctor demanded that I detox. That was really tough. Shortly after I did so, I joined AA and went through the 12-step program. I seemed to be doing okay for a little while. In the beginning of 2011, because of life and business, I started to drink again. I spent most of the summer of 2011 in Charlottesville, where my oldest daughter was living. I was in and out of the hospital there. I was now blessed with 2 beautiful granddaughters, ages 4 and 2, that I was getting to spend time with, but that didn't stop me from picking up the bottle. Because of my age when I had my youngest son, I was still paying child support at 50 years old. In 2012, I decided I wasn't going to pay it at all. After 40 days in jail and a cold turkey detox, they changed my mind. I was ready to pay it. The judge was very gracious to let me out when she did. She initially gave me a year, but I didn't stay that long. Later that year, my business was stagnant, and my brother was a contractor for a major coal company, and he asked me to come work with him, so I did. My drinking seemed to slow down a little because I was busy at work. In 2015, my mom fell and broke her hip. After being in hospitals and rehabilitation nursing homes, she passed away in February of 2016. Of course, my alcohol consumption increased. I myself started being in and out of hospitals because of issues that were caused due to the alcohol. My brother retired, and I was offered the same job I was doing for him for the coal company. As time went by, I began to drink more and more again after work. I would come home and drink until I went to bed. I would wake up throughout the night to drink. I purchased a breathalyzer so that I could run tests on when I needed to stop in order to be 0% at work if I was tested. I became a pro at this. It's now 2020. We are in the pandemic. I am drinking more and more. No place to go, nothing to do. I would work, drink, eat, drink some more, go to bed, wake up, and do it all over again. That was my life. By the end of 2020, I had gained an excessive amount of weight. My blood pressure was sky high, and I was stressed from work. All this mixed with alcohol and blood thinners. It was the perfect storm. In January 2021, I went to the ER. I was bleeding internally. They found a bleeding ulcer and diverticulitis. I took off work on short-term disability while trying to recap, but that didn't stop me from drinking. I was home, bored. Why not have a drink? My mobility due to my accident in 1999 was decreasing. I had developed severe osteoarthritis in my left hip, and a replacement was needed. I had to use a cane and wait to be approved for the surgery, but still yet the alcohol was helping with the pain, or so I thought. On April 16th, 2021, I had a seizure at home and another one in the ambulance. I got to the Abingdon ER where they did a CT and told me I needed to go to Bristol where a neurosurgeon was. The doctor informed me I had a brain bleed and would have to have surgery to relieve the pressure. The surgery was successful, and I was released on May 3rd after 2 weeks of mostly being in the ICU. I was so thankful to be alive. My mobility lessened even more, and I was now on a walker. So, of course, I felt like I needed to have a few drinks to knock off the edge, even though I had already fully detoxed during the hospital stay. A few days after I got out of the hospital, I had an appointment with an orthopedic surgeon where he told me I would have to have my hip replacement. The only problem was they weren't doing elective surgeries because of COVID. Time goes on, so let's drink some more until I can get this surgery. Thankfully, the hospital let him bring a special table required for my hip replacement to the surgery center where they were doing elective surgeries. They scheduled it for September 15th, where I managed to stay sober long enough to have the procedure done. Everything went well. Day by day, I began to move around with no pain. But I was now realizing that after 43 years of getting up and going to work, I now have nothing to do again. My anxiety started to increase because I'm bored. Man, I got to have some bourbon. So I began to drink more and more again. I was drinking almost a liter a day. On October 17th, 2021, I was in my darkest place I had ever been. I didn't want to do this anymore. My daughter came to my house that day and talked to me. I told her that I either wanted to die or get better. But it was Sunday, and there was nowhere I could go for the night. I asked her if she would run out to the liquor store for me so I didn't have to go through detox, and I would go somewhere tomorrow. Finally, her and her mom talked me into going to the ER instead. At the ER, I was laying in bed shaking because I hadn't had alcohol in a few hours. The doctor told me that my blood alcohol level was 0.374. This is alcohol poisoning level. It was so high that they wouldn't give me anything for withdrawals. Somewhere around 5 a.m. the next morning, I was waking up surrounded by several nurses and doctors. My son, who I had left at such an early age, was right there beside me, refusing to leave. The doctor told me I had cardiac arrest and had to be resuscitated. They performed CPR and shock to get my heart started again. I was clinically dead for 5 minutes. to be brought back to life only by the grace of God touching those doctors. The cardiologist and ER doctor both told me if I had not come to the hospital the night before, I would have died at home. I was released and started a service program through our local community services online due to COVID. I had 3 to 4 classes a week. After 2 weeks of this, I couldn't do it anymore. New Year's night, 2022. After all this, I stopped at a Shell station to get gas. I said to myself, you know what? It's New Year's. I'm going to go in and get me 2 Mike's Hard Lemonades. They aren't going to hurt me. So I did just that. Unfortunately, I really enjoyed them. Later that night, I was reminded of a picture that my daughter showed me from back in April 2021. A selfie she had taken with tears streaming down her face that said, "My dad is going to die, and he could have stopped it." She knew it. I prayed to God to not let me start this again. The next evening, I was talking to my ex-sister-in-law, and she told me about a program called CR at her church in Atlanta. She was attending because of a child loss. I told her I wondered where the nearest one to me was. She told me that my church has the same program. After being a member of Highland since 1995, I had never heard of CR. But just when I needed it the most, there it was. That's why I'm here, to talk about God's grace. So if anyone has any doubts about God and what He can do, they should hear my story. I almost drowned as a kid. I had pulmonary embolisms, a cerebral hemorrhage, cardiac arrest. Wow. I'm a firm believer that God has a sense of humor, but I can about guarantee He was pretty fed up with me. But He never gave up on me, and that's what kind of God we serve. Thanks to His grace and mercy, I have never in my life been a closer or better person, friend, father, and grandfather to my 4 children and my 4 grandchildren who love me unconditionally after all I did to them. To my church and CR family, I love you all, and please continue your prayers for me as I will for you. Today, I am 410 days sober. Anyone who is struggling with something in your life, anything, right now is the time to make up your mind that you want it changed and turn it over to God. Thanks to God, my family, and CR, He gave me chance after chance at life, and I'm not going to mess it up this time. This is who I am. Wow. What a testimony. This is back to me, by the way. I won't lie to you. My initial reaction was to be angry at God for taking him. How could He do this? Why now? Why take him away that now that he is finally doing so well? I finally had a relationship with my Father that I had always dreamed of. My children had the best pappy in the entire world, and He loved them more than anything. He still has so many lives to touch. I don't understand. Then my nanny told me something that helped me to step back and think. All those times he probably should have passed away, he didn't. Why now? Because he was ready. God allowed him the chance to finally be saved and live right for over a year so that he was saved and could be with Him in His kingdom. Glory to God for that. My sister also brought it up to me that we have to be grateful for the year that we did get that good time with Him, because unfortunately, in the world we live in, that is more than some people can say about getting to know their Father. So today I choose to be comforted in knowing that He has been called home. I was doing my daily reading, and I happened to be in 2 Timothy. I came across these verses that were so fitting for his testimony and everything that all of you are going through. 2 Timothy 2:21 and 22. Therefore, if anyone cleanses himself from what is dishonorable, he will be a vessel for honorable use, set apart as holy, useful to the master of the house, ready for every good work. So flee youthful passions and pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace, along with those who call on the Lord from a pure heart. And I skipped to 25 and 26, and this is King James Version. in meekness instructing those that oppose themselves, if God peradventure will give them repentance to acknowledging of truth, and that they may recover themselves out of the snare of the devil, who are taken captive by him at his will. My dad's changed legacy changed the way my family sees things, changed the way that we will continue to live out his legacy. Today, I'm grateful that he got to live his truest life for even just a short time. Thank you all for allowing me to share his testimony today. I want to thank you all here at CR and Highlands Fellowship for helping him on his journey with Christ. I hear that he helped a lot of you too, and that makes my heart so very proud. You guys were family to him. I am grateful for the opportunities you gave him to be a part of and play such an important role in such an amazing organization. Thank you all for the love and support you showed him. Thank you for the stories you've shared with me about his love for both his family, his friends, his CR family here. Thank you all for your kind words and reminders of just how much we meant to him. I will forever be grateful for this special time in his life. I am mostly thankful to God for allowing me the time I got with him and to play such an important role in his life as he did mine. His changed life is so inspiring to me. I hope that God will allow me to continue out his new legacy. And if any of you need to reach out, please feel free to reach out to me, and I will try my best to do what he was doing for you. Thank you for allowing me to be here today to share his testimony and the stories that helped me learn to lean on God in the hardest of times. Thank you for listening to the stories that helped shape me into who I am.